My name is Barry Cranford. I'm the main organiser of the London CTOs, also the founder of RecWorks, which is a tech recruitment company. So we run events, all sorts of different events, virtual events like this, roundtables, and in-person events. We have a quarterly conference, and we've got all sorts of different sort of panel events and things happening throughout the year. So this event is, we're working with our partners Codurance for this event. So Mash and Steve, who you'll hear from shortly. So I personally massive fan of Codurance. So I knew Mash and Sandro, the co-founders of Codurance, before the company was started. So it always feels like I'm sort of part of the team there, whether they want me to be or not. But huge fans of what they do. They're heavily involved in the tech communities and always have been. As I'm sure they'll talk about a little bit. But we were talking recently about one of their service lines around software modernization. We were wondering if it would be an interesting topic for a talk. Started reaching out to a few other CTOs and engineering leaders, and it seemed to be, well, we had a quick conversation. I think could have gone on for about 3 or 4 hours on this. So there definitely seemed to be a lot of themes that were interesting and relevant to a lot of different people. So that's the background for today. We've done a bunch of these roundtables before, so we're doing it a little bit differently from previous ones. In the past, they've been entirely open, and some of the feedback afterwards has been that we didn't have enough of the right people in the room for the event. And so we've gone to a bit more lengths this time to make sure we've secured some decent guests that have come along. They've got some great experience on this. So I'm going to hand over quickly to Mash. We'll do a quick whip round of the guests that we've invited, give a quick introductions of what they're here to talk about and to share. And then Steve's going to host the rest of the session. But any conversations, anything you want to talk about, please add it in the chat box, or you can put the virtual hand up, should be available to do through Zoom. So yeah, enjoy. Hope it's good. Mash, I'll hand over to you if you could just give a quick introduction of yourself.
Yes, thanks, Barry. So I'm Mash Badar, one of the co-founders and the managing director for Codurance UK. My personal background is as a software engineer working for large enterprises and the public sector as well, and investment banking. I see Owen Woods is there. I've had the pleasure of working with him at UBS as well. And as Codurance, this is how we started, and our kind of work with the software craftsmanship community and agile and XP movements led us a lot towards this kind of work as well, where we were kind of naturally placed to work on legacy modernization, to kind of helping organizations get better at changing strategic systems so that they can kind of move at the pace that their business demands. So that's kind of the quick background for me.
Great, thanks, Mash. Graham, you have to give a quick background?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Graham Haythornthwaite. I'm currently VP of Engineering at a business called Beyond, which is an EdTech business. So it covers 3 brands in one, D-Vouchers and Secure Schools. Been there a few years now. It's been a rapidly growing business. We've doubled the size of the engineering team. Secure Schools is our first acquisition, and we've done all of that whilst working a 4-day week. So that's been a very interesting journey. I've also got a background as a software engineer. Started out with C++, did a lot of work with sort of VoIP telephony, and was involved in a startup which went from kind of nothing to recording 40% of UK police forces and 3 of the world's busiest trading floors. So that was a great journey as well. Software modernization has been a constant theme, as well as lots of growth and exciting new build. There's always maintaining and working out what you do with the stuff you've built and how you keep it valuable. So hopefully I've got some useful stories to tell and contribute today.
Perfect. Thanks, Graham. If I could ask Emmanuel and then Alan Buxton to just give a quick introduction.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Emanuele Tomei. I'm the CTO at a company called Mosaic Smart Data, which is a fintech providing some data analytics platform for FIC markets. My background is software engineering, so I've been an individual contributor for about 15 years, or the first 15 years of my career. moved on to management and leadership for the last 7 years, let's say. So I've been on both sides of the fence. So trying to convince someone we need to modernize some software because it wasn't fit for purpose anymore, but also on the other side where people try to convince me that we do need to do it. So often I think having to understand the trade-offs and trying to speak either the tech language or the business language is something which is very, very important in our role. In terms of my experience with modernization, the last 2 companies I've joined were about 10 years old. So there was a lot of old code in there. We did a couple of cloud migration. So there was a lot of re-architecturing there. And also I've worked with some, let's call it fast-growing greenfield projects that's very quickly needed some modernization, even if they were some, let's say, greenfield projects. Yeah, that's about it for me.
Thanks, Alan. Is that are you okay to come on? I think you're just on mute there.
Yeah, trying to operate the tech, a bit embarrassing. I just so I don't work in the tech business, they can't operate Zoom properly. I'm Alan Buxton. I'm a CTO. I started off as a programmer in the mid-90s. I've 2 of the jobs I've had in my career, I was hired to sort out a screwed up modernization project. And one of the times I was fired for a company, I was fired because I had screwed up a modernization project. So I've got a fair amount of love and hate for these kinds of things. I'm looking forward to chatting about.
Great, thanks, Alan. And Toby.
Sure. Yeah, so Toby O'Rourke, CTO at a company called Fund Apps. We're a SaaS RegTech provider. I guess like a lot of people that have introduced themselves, started out as an engineer, became a CTO, have done various sides of the modernization conversation in my time. And we're kind of a year on from wrapping a successful modernization of our platform. So yeah, nice to be able to share some of the lessons and some hindsight on that experience.
Great, thanks, Toby. And Manogna, glad you got in. Sorry about the challenges there.
Sorry, I somehow assumed it's on the Google Calendar. Sorry for that. Hello, my name is Manogna. I'm a head of engineering in domestic in general. Like many people on the panel, started as an engineer, have been part of modernization in various capacities, like from being an engineer to leading it as a tech lead to head of engineering, have seen how it works, how it doesn't work, why it shouldn't work, why it should work, etc. So glad to share experiences and even more excited to learn from others' experiences.
Fantastic. Great. And then finally, I'll hand over to Steve. So Steve's going to host for the remainder. We'll come back at about 2 o'clock. We'll have some optional breakout rooms if anybody does have time to hang around. But yeah, other than that, Steve, over to you.
Thanks, Barry. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Steve Lifford. I am the COO for Codurance UK. And like just about everybody else on the panel, I started as an engineer in a long time ago now. But I've been involved in a lot of software modernization projects, public and private sector, and a whole bunch with Codurance over the last sort of 9 or 10 years. I'm going to try not to give too much opinion today. I'm going to try and steer the conversation. The panelists, we've all met before and kind of brought out some themes. But if there are things, questions that you have or things that you'd like to speak about, then probably the easiest thing is to drop that into the chat. I'll keep the chat window open, and as I see messages pop up there, I'll bring the questions in as we can. So let's start kind of really at the start, I guess. And Manogna, you chatted quite a lot in our previous chat about the triggers for modernization, right at the start. What are the common themes we see as the kind of the input to give the impetus for these kind of modernization programs? What starts them in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, multiple, both external and internal, isn't it? The first one, I mean, the predominant one, unfortunately, which I would talk towards the end, is the primary reason for these modernization and transformations. But the right reasons for these transformations, which I have seen, are one, either the deployment, the setup, the infrastructure was leaking money, as in we understood that it's not maintainable over the long term. The maintenance costs keep going up and we don't have the skill sets to maintain, etc. And the second one, which is the right reason, is the time to market is slowing us down. As the time to market keeps growing, maybe the tech stack is outdated, the engineers are not happy, the hiring is taking longer than expected. We have production issues that we don't know how to fix. The tooling is not supported. There is no infrastructure to support those and make the ecosystem better. Like the productivity and the finance reasons are the primary reasons, which makes sense. But I have seen transformations which are driven by leadership changes. Whenever either a new CTO or a new CIO or a new CEO comes in and says, okay, so we see the normal bias of come in, evaluate, and see, okay, I need to prove my value. And so I think one of the primary reasons it starts with, they start creating a tech strategy, and that naturally drives to modernization. It might or might not work. The only catch there is, are we using data to drive these decisions, or are we using our pre-context from the ghosts that we carry from the previous jobs on what worked and what didn't work as a reason to trigger this? I think these are the primary triggers I have seen. Mash, like do you have something to add? I see you on the picture. I don't know how Zoom works.
Yes, of course. I mean, these are, as you said, you kind of mentioned quite a few things, and some very good reasons behind it, like cost, time to market, all these things. There is, if we are kind of enumerating the different reasons, there is this cult of personality as well. So certain people, especially developers, they're very opinionated, and they see things in a particular way, and when they go to a new place, or they've been on a course or read a book and so on, they will start almost kind of creating a movement to almost a narrative that things are not working as they should and so on, and so there's a bottom-up kind of trigger as well that happens, and it's, although very valid, it's one of the most dangerous in my view, because they often fail to connect that to the kind of economic variables and what matters to the business, and often it turns out to be an exercise in its own right. So there's no real value, and in fact sometimes it even makes things worse, and makes the kind of the cohesiveness or functioning of the team much worse as well. I've seen that quite often in many organizations, where this kind of cult personality, or someone with strong kind of technical background, but also kind of motivation, just driving the agenda, and nobody really understanding what they want, but everyone just kind of falling behind them as well. I think that's also quite common to see. Yeah,
I've seen this especially when the companies move from startup, proving the value of the product, and moves into that scale-up zone, where they used to have a working monolith, and then that's the time when the company grows and new bunch of engineers comes in, and suddenly everything seems to be archaic, while it is not. So monolith is suddenly the villain, which actually served the business, and people are like, we need to modernize this, we need to break this, we need to get new technologies. I think that's the phase we need to really be sure about, like, what's the business value, what's the next step, what are our data points driving these decisions, and not personal choices. I mean, we used to call it like CV driven development. People love getting the technologies that they will want to learn and want to use it. So it's a common trap.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Another trigger that I would like to quickly mention is like that incident in production that got everyone's attention. We've had many clients coming to us and say, like, we had an outage and we lost 1 million, 2 million in revenues in the past 2 days. Could you come and make sure that thing doesn't happen? And so, well, if only it was as simple as that. There's a very long tail and context behind why that happened, and it's not just someone in particular's fault or that particular part of the system, but there's so many different aspects to why that happened. So that also kind of creates a trigger sometimes. It's like something that truly got everyone's attention because there was a big kind of catastrophic failure as well.
Yeah.
would ask to this panel, like in terms of financial and how board looks at the technology, like would that actually make a case? Let's say the company is going to another round of valuation, and having a slick modern technology could bump up the valuation of the company. Would that be a reason to show, hey, look, we have a modern software, so you have to evaluate us like 100 million more? I mean, I haven't seen that
At
personally.
least in my experience, not really. I think so. We went through an investment round a few years ago, and yeah, the quality of the diligence, technology due diligence, wasn't that high. I think that from my experience, what they care about is what your growth models look like, and how you're going to grow your top line. As long as there's nothing mental in your tech stack, like you've got a load of really out of date software, or a load of license pain with open source libraries and sort of viral licenses, you're fine. You'll find that the diligence will be not a problem. So I don't think you need to worry about it from that perspective, if I'm honest. There are other reasons why you might need to, because your growth is going to such a stage that you can no longer support, which is, a place we found ourselves in. But if I may, I'd like to just come back to that thing about CV driven development, which you mentioned, which is a wonderful line. But I think, again, that's a symptom of sort of misalignment, and your engineers not understanding the kind of the business objectives and the business goals and all that sort of thing. And I would probably say, before you go off and embark on a modernisation program, think about what you can do to get those people in alignment, because chances are, once people align, they'll actually stop kind of making those requests for re-architecting that service that only gets used once or changes once a year or something, and they'll start actually thinking about how they can add value. Because as engineers, we are problem solvers, and we want to solve hard problems. And once we realize there are hard problems in the business, that's much more exciting than the whatever service.
Toby, one of the things that I often see, especially when these kind of initiatives are driven from that kind of CV type thing, is that it's almost third or fourth level of the thing that they will do, and they don't connect it to the top level kind of business KPIs. And even kind of more senior tech people, it's astonishing how often they just do not even think about, forget about the top level kind of revenue and profits and so on, but even connecting something simple as, okay, we're gonna kind of increase the lead time or make this build faster. Well, okay, what does that help us achieve in terms of time saved, right? Just kind of those kind of things as well. They fail to connect them. They just don't work through that data. I think you were talking about as well, but they don't drive their decisions from data, and then they don't get the feedback from that. They just think that this is the right thing to do, and we're gonna do it. And why should we spend so much effort gathering that data?
I'm sure a load of us love Dora, right? And it's a wonderful thing. But at the end of the day, it can also be a vanity metric, and people will get it, and they'll say, well, service X, we only deploy it once a quarter. That's terrible. You're like, you need to deploy it once a quarter. So why spend?
Exactly.
That's exactly one of the things that happened in one of my modernization projects, where we had about, I think, 30 services that were not by any means CI/CD. And someone was pushing for 100% CI/CD, but some of these, they were deployed, once every 3 months. So why should we spend, time doing that? So eventually we set on about like 80% of the services being like CI/CD, and the others, they were just lagging behind, because by the time you make them CI/CD, you have deployed them 100 times, which is basically like 3-4 years worth, deployments. So there are always, trade-offs of how much you want to modernize as well. Sometimes you don't need to modernize the entire stack, but only the things that you touch, let's say, more often.
And of course, the alternative to modernize is to rebuild, right? And that's something that we talked about on Monday. And Graham, you had some kind of thoughts on this, right?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I think one of my experiences was joining a business where they'd spent 2 years on a rebuild project already. The team were completely behind that, but there was a change of leadership, and I came in, and we looked at, well, where's the revenue? The team was saying that we probably need another 2 years to get a comparable product out to the market. In the meantime, we had a system that was out there. It was one of the best in the market. It was generating all the revenue, and customers weren't getting any new features and functionality or fixes because everyone was working on this new product. It certainly wasn't great from a morale point of view. A lot of those people who'd invested time in the replacement products moved on, and we had to build a whole new team. But once we got that alignment piece, we made it quite a successful modernisation project. I had developers tell me there's not a single line of code in that original product that's worth keeping. In my view, it was some of the worst code I've ever seen. It was in old technology as well. Apologies if anyone's a VB.NET developer, but I think that regularly comes out as one of the most hated languages for developers. That was the choice at the time. So there was lots of drivers to kind of move. We used the opportunity of sort of business value to move it forward. So the demand in the market was actually for a cloud-based modern web interface that we didn't have in this system, but we realized if we could deliver that alongside modernizing the technology as we went, carving bits out, reshaping it, that gave us a path to the value, really, without having to throw it all away. We were building on what was there. So yeah, I think really understanding the value and the drivers, like we touched on earlier. Work out where's the money, what's the business value, why are you doing it? And there are different technical approaches, which means you can modernize, you can find the kind of the crux of the problem, focus on that and deliver that, rather than the problem being the technology itself.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of this kind of the rebuild versus modernize, what's some of the key considerations in the decision?
Yeah, I think it's really about the business value. So actually going to the business saying, right, you're going to get no new features and functionality, and actually to our customers, sorry, you're not going to get anything for 2 years, just isn't a conversation we were prepared to sort of face. We felt that would just completely lose our place in the market. So we had to keep delivering. So how do we deliver? We could have split the team in two and said, well, you maintain the old system while this team builds something new. But that just sort of slows down both efforts. I think the combination of how do we deliver what the market actually needs was the real kind of crux of the problem. That's the strategy. That's what we need to go for.
That's really interesting. Sorry, who was that? Sorry.
No, it was me, but carry on.
No, I think I was just about to come to you because I know that we've spoken at length in the past about the drivers for modernisation, and one of those perhaps being like a product roadmap.
Mm-hmm. So this is actually I was gonna quote Kent Beck in make the change easy and then make the easy change. And there's a lot in there. Is that it's like kind of looking at it from a change perspective, right? So what you're trying to do is from your product roadmap, from what is the next most valuable thing for the business, and from that perspective, then you looking at your software and thinking, okay, well, if what are the areas that need to change so that this change becomes easier. Of course, that is kind of more evolutionary and doesn't speak to kind of having a longer term vision for where you want it to be. But it doesn't mean that you can't have the vision. You can have a vision. You can even keep reviewing those and think, but you should always point your work from the kind of the make the change easy and then make the easy change point of view, which is understand the next thing, the next most valuable thing, have a vision where you're going to evolve to, but only do the thing that is necessary so that you can make that the next easy change. I think that is like with any kind of great things, it's a very simple thing to say, but a very, very difficult things to do. And so many times we see that's not what happens, that people, it just becomes things have tentacles, and it starts becoming open heart surgery very, very quickly, even when people start it that way, because they just can't stop for themselves from having that discipline to only change what's needed for the next bit of value.
Yeah, I think if you consider product delivery as a capability of the business, always being able to deliver and respond to change, I think is one of the key requirements of a team. So you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You can have the greatest plans, but you always need to be able to deliver. And if you're saying actually this product isn't available, or we can't react to that change, you're going to create quite a problem there. So always having something that you can release, I think is really important. And I love that phrase, you know, about making things easy, doing the easy thing. I really like that.
The one of the things that we spoke together on Monday, and Alan, I spoke with you earlier, is around this kind of the rebuild versus modernize thing. One of the considerations there is that if you do a rebuild, you're all in, right? It's going to be a considerable length of time probably to do a complete rebuild, and you can't stop halfway, right? So, but generally with this kind of iterative approach to modernization, which everyone's been advocating today, you know, we are delivering value at every stage, which means we can stop at any stage and realize the value, right?
That's correct. The value is not continuous, right? It's further right along the corner, like you can't deliver value. And one of the things which people don't speak about, and I have faced it firsthand, is the culture that happens when we start doing the rebuild. It feels as if it's a rebirth, and everyone is like, let's not do the same mistakes as we did with the old one. And then it suddenly creates a divide of good ones, not so good ones. And I have seen the culture degrade, and people thinking whatever the old system was delivering value to the business, and we are at this point of discussion because of whatever that system has delivered. So I think a crucial responsibility of leadership is to position the message right, to say whatever got us here won't get there because our business strategy, like Mash was saying, like a product roadmap, our product vision is taking us in a different direction. The messaging has to be done right to preserve the culture of, because I mean, like Graham was saying, we have to keep the old system running till we build a new system. That's a money cow for the company. So the culture aspect has to be really thought through very carefully.
Yeah, and I think go on.
Sorry, I was just going to say that it's actually such an important thing, because often we look at legacy system and we look at it from a negative perspective to say, well, how did we end up there? Well, actually, eventually all systems end up that way, because you design the system for your current knowledge, and the next bit you already have these designs embedded, and evolving it is always a premature evolution. If you had designed it from scratch just for that, it would have been better. So systems inevitably lead towards legacy. That's a normal kind of evolution of systems. So it's not that someone did a bad job. It's that they did the best job with the information that they had available. Of course, that's barring bad kind of programming practices and all those kind of things. I'm kind of simplifying it. But more often than not, even the best developers with the best sense in the world, the most kind of best design sense in the world, they will still create legacy, because they will design the system according to what the knowledge and what the system needs to do today and not tomorrow, and so on. And every evolution is some kind of compromise. And compromises on top of compromise at some point lead to something that we then kind of look at it in a way that, you know, how did we get to this? Well, it's actually quite a natural thing.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting, you know, point, which it's very tied, you know, with the culture side of things. We talked about, you know, the monolith before, people not coming in and say, oh, there's a monolith, we need to break it down because, you know, microservices are the way to go. But the reality is that if you're a small company, you need to build something for today. So if you have a user base of, let's say, 100 users that you expect to, you can't, you know, start building microservices, because it will take you, I don't know, a year to do it. You build a monolith because that's what the company needs at that point in time. And then, you know, 6 months later, you know, the company grows, you need a different sort of software. So it's not that the software was bad, actually was the best software in that point in time. Now you need to evolve it because the company needs something different. I mean, if you think about Google, Google hasn't been built, the way it is today. It has been built, 100 times over, because the traffic changes, the amount of users, change. So it's something which is good for today, which is necessarily not good for tomorrow. So it's the natural, let's say, life cycle, and making sure that people understand this from a cultural perspective helps not create that divide of, oh, that's not good anymore, or people that wrote that, they were not thinking about, oh, in the future we might have, 5 million users. Yeah, but we didn't yesterday. So why should we spend, all these resources to build a bulletproof system for, let's say, 10 years from now?
And also, you spend a lot of our time worrying about, I mean, the nature of our job is that we worry about the stuff that doesn't work, right? And so it blows up in your imagination that it's much worse than what it is. And you look at this system and you're saying this system's a pile of crap, needs to rebuild it from scratch. And actually 80% of it works pretty well, actually, most of the time. And you forget that you're going to have to rebuild all that stuff again if you commit to rebuilding. So we recently acquired a company who also, cough, cough, have a platform in the classic ASP built in 20 years ago, right? And it's very sophisticated. It's got a lot of features in there, right? So could you rebuild all that in a new technology? Obviously, it needs to happen, but it would take years to do that, right? And like we've heard, you can't just stop everything else. So what we ended up doing is, so I'm a big fan of, number one, Joel Spolsky's things you never do is rebuild from scratch, right? There's his blog post from 25 years ago. And Martin Fowler's piece about strangler figs, right? Where you build a little bit and then you gradually kill off the rest of the software, right? So what my rule that I've got in my team is that we can do whatever you like, as long as you can deploy to production once a month. No less frequently than once a month, right? And so what they ended up doing is we run two platforms. You've got the old platform, and then we can fix this page, and this page is now on the new platform. And then gradually over time, this old platform disappears, right? So that seems to be working certainly better than the examples where I did try and do this whole massive rebuild from scratch, completely underestimated how good all the core stuff was, then ended up falling out with the business.
I think this is such an important point, is that even if you're doing a rewrite, it must release value early. So it must not be okay, now we're in it for, we're in it completely, like Steve, as you pointed out, like it should never be like that. You should always apply those kind of patterns to release value early, and to be able to stop wherever, or pause wherever you need to pause, because often one of the biggest arguments towards rewrite, and it's a valid argument, that they say that evolution is meandering, it's difficult, it expends much more energy, and rewrite is kind of straight path to where we need to get to. And but it's a false dichotomy. You can actually do a rewrite that actually also is a bit meandering, a bit less maybe, but still releasing that value early, rather than that straight path where nothing is available until it's kind of feature complete.
So yes, I agree, and this is the kind of comes to the whole lean thing, right? And can we, I think I wrote it down here somewhere. So I didn't write a name against it, but we were talking about the kind of the modernisation thing, and how sometimes it's not always possible to do that kind of lean incremental approach, right? Sometimes the core feature set is enormous. I wanted to move on to let's assume that we've decided we're going to do this modernisation. We know that it's going to be probably an expensive effort, or at least divert some effort from feature development or BAU, whatever, divert some effort in the company towards this modernisation thing. Often it's not within our gift to do that. Often we need to go and then put our plan together and then go and get the permission to do it, or the money to do it, or maybe that's the same thing. I don't know. But so I think it's that buy-in from the leadership, whether that be the board or the kind of the CEO or whoever that happens to be. I know, Emmanuel, you had some thoughts around this about, you know, getting this buy-in from the leadership team.
Yeah, I had to do like a couple of times in my career, and I think what's really important is like to have like the two different types of views. So you have the inside out view, let's call it, where as a technologist, you know what needs to be done. You are, let's say, business savvy enough to make, let's say, the right decision, say, okay, this needs to be rewritten, so this is what we're going to do. So just go out and not tell others that, you know, this is what needs to happen. But if you look at the outside in perspective, so from a, let's not say the CPO, but let's say the CFO perspective, that looks at the tech department and needs to understand why they're going to do this, because you know what, that software is making money. So what's in it for me? What's in it for the company? So why should we be doing this rather than doing something else? So I think at that point becomes really important to like stop using the technical, let's say, language and start using the business one, putting yourself in their shoes and trying to explain what's in it for them, which for different people, you know, means, you know, different things. Because for a CFO perspective, it may be that we need to, you know, rewrite this because the technologies we decided to use, they use too many resources. So our, you know, bill is too high. So we could do, you know, with half of the cost. So that for the CFO is a good reason for, you know, rewriting something, because our operational costs will go down. Maybe I don't know, the install or the operations of the system, they are not too costly. So the COO might be interested in, you know, reducing that cost. So I think it's very important to understand, like, not just from a technology perspective why we need to do something, but also for the other in the leadership team to understand, like, what's in it for them. Why do we need to rewrite or modernize or, you know, spend time taking care of the software?
Yeah, and we talked also about there's kind of two different things, and there's kind of the cost reduction, as you mentioned there, but there's also value creation, and that they require the cost reduction is a much easier return on investment to put across to a board than the value creation.
Yeah, exactly, and often it's not just the dollar value, because reasons for let's say rewriting the software might be that every time we put some feature out, it takes, you know, twice as much of the time it should take. So our cost is double because we need to pay double the time of the engineers. Or it could be that, you know, every time we make a change to the software, it's so complex that we introduce new bugs. And then, you know, our NPS score goes down because users are not happy with it because the platform is unstable. So there are different ways of looking at, you know, costs and looking at, let's say, the dollar value is not always like straight to be realized. And also developer happiness as well, because, you know, developers need to work with a platform which is easy, you know, to work with. It's easy to be implemented. They're happy to work with it. That's another, you know, big factor to take into account.
Yeah.
I think if you've got to a place where you're taking twice as long, for instance, to build a feature, for me that is a massive failure of product management. And actually one of the things I think we've done really well in the business I'm in now is created that alignment between product managers, product ownership, and engineering, and making those folks care about things like our cycle time, our lead time, our time to value, change failure rates, all those sorts of things, because they understand what that means for the product and therefore the business. That kind of them and us world that you sometimes see, where product managers are like, give me features, give me features, give me features, and engineers are going, oh, but I need to pay back some debt. To say we've solved it is probably hubris, but we're doing all right at maintaining that that balance between, you know, incremental modernization and building features, which is what I think actually what we really want. Like, a rewrite is failure in some ways, and I would
We did a similar thing. So we have some buffer time, let's say 10 to 20% on average, where the rule of thumb is leave something better than you found it. So it doesn't have to be necessarily a complete rewrite of a function, but if you go there, you see there's a bit of tech that just fix it right away, or ask and spend a little bit more time. So that evolution, it's something that you do like step by step, and not the big rewrite that you need to do like in the end.
I'm glad that you got developer experience as a topic, because I always say like there are two types of users for every software. One are commercial users and one are internal users. If engineers are not happy using the software, building the software, it's a smell that you really need to dig in to figure out like what is it that they're really not happy about. It's difficult to point to. It could just be a pure bias, people not liking the technology in general. So you really have to measure it with maybe retention, maybe time it takes, a cycle time, lead time. It has to be a complete story. It can't be someone not liking it or liking it. When I had an amazing app built in PHP, no one really liked it. And so the engagement was low, but the system was doing well. So we had to really work through them. It's a bit superficial opinion to start with. So when we actually sit with the engineers and go to one level meta discussion to say what exactly is the problem, coordination headwinds are a thing. Like we have to agree to it. Like those things happen. So is it the coordination that's really pissing them off, or is it just the technology in general, or is it the design patterns? Like what is it? And mark it up with the service, the perception service that we have, the retention rates that we are having.
What I've often seen as the root cause is discontinuity in the team, right? So if you go from an outsourced team to an in-house team, or from one in-house team to another in-house team, or you have a number of key contributors leaving at a critical time, and all of the knowledge gets lost, and the software is only worth. The software can only be maintained and evolved if the team has a good model and understanding of how it works and how it can be changed. That's I alluded to that earlier, that the ability to change it and to respond to change, that's value in itself, and that's kind of the foundation for a lot of the higher level topics here that we talked about. And at some point, you end up in a situation where there is that previous knowledge has been lost. Then, even if we don't rebuild the team, if we don't rebuild the software, if we want to modernize it and change it, we still have to rebuild the team. We still have to rebuild the understanding of the software, and that can be just as hard an exercise as starting again from scratch.
There is one thing tied similar to this, to developer satisfaction. Developers, they start reducing scope for what they will be satisfied, because they do need feedback. So usually if the feedback is lacking at the top level, they will start constraining how they get feedback. So I have seen, especially working in investment banking, people doing test-driven TDD cycles, and these tests are running super quick, those unit tests. But I had never seen them actually run the whole application on their machine. But they're still very satisfied because they're moving fast, or from their own perspective. So they've kind of reduced the scope, and they are getting satisfaction from their own kind of viewpoint. The reason I say that is that some of the most well-satisfied teams that I have seen and I have worked in have been the small team that were kind of almost like startups, or a startup, in fact, 2 or 3 people. And they very, very rarely talk about, although they care about things like, lead times, and they care about, automation and pipeline and the ability to understand the system and so on. But because their focus is also around the business and how the software that they're producing is impacting the business, and they're so tied into that cycle, that kind of whole team cycle, that their satisfaction not only comes from how quickly and well built the system is and how quickly they can understand it, but also how quickly they can drive the impact. And I think if you can somehow create that organization at scale as well, which goes back to the point of connecting the business metrics to some of the productivity and satisfaction metrics, but the other way around as well, connecting satisfaction and productivity metrics to those business metrics and creating that almost visibility across the organization between product and engineering. I think that also is a great source of satisfaction and experience for the developers themselves as well. And it's more difficult, but if you can get it to that point, then you align the source of satisfaction for the developers with what actually matters to the business as well.
Yeah. It's there's been a question in the chat here. I'd like to go to Alan first for this, if you don't mind, Alan. So Azad is asking, should we work on the tech debt first before going to modernisation, or how should we approach this kind of modernisation attempt?
I struggle a little bit with I'm not really sure what tech debt is. In my mind, tech debt is anything that makes a developer feel a little bit ill when they have to touch that piece of code. So on that definition, the stuff maybe the way to fix tech debt is to modernize something, right? So you've got some library that you're using that's in an old version. The best way to address it is by upgrading. But I like what Toby was saying actually about the alignment between product and engineering, because I think the key thing is if you can get the product people to treat tech debt as a feature, then you're golden, right? Because then you're having the same conversations about we're going to fix this, and it's going to mean that we can now deliver stuff faster because we're on a newer platform or something, or we can respond, we can internationalize it easier or whatever.
Mm-hmm. They say that the value, like the customer value, the business value that is paying back the debt, that is called future value. So it's a type of value that's defined, like, and then we can actually quantify to say, hey, like this is the future value that would be delivered if we address this tech debt. I think I don't remember that article that I was reading the other day. It's like it's the sixth type of value which we don't talk about in general. So if we say it that way, to say now the product thinks tech debt is a feature, it delivers value, but you can't see it now. If you don't do it, the future would be doomed.
To reference a Martin Fowler article for the second time in an hour. He's got a really nice article. It's quite old, about the idea of design stamina, and kind of this idea that over time, if you do nothing and just hack features in, you kind of reach a point of stagnation. But if you do a little bit of thinking ahead of time, you can always kind of keep your productivity and your ability to add value relatively sane. So you might go, it's kind of slightly intuitive, right? So by going fractionally slower because you take a little bit of time to think, over a longer period of time, you're actually much faster because you're not hitting that kind of debt wall that triggers a rewrite or something, which is a really nice concept. I'll find it in the chat.
Toby, we often talk about this continuous software modernization effort that always needs to happen alongside your development effort or new feature development or change effort. And actually what we call software modernization is this building up, this pressure of building up, because it's not been happening. So this pressure keeps building up and it gets to the point where that design stamina is much less, so that cholesterol basically has been building up. And then you have to do something more drastic to reduce that before then you can start having that continuous modernization effort. So it's that, you've not been doing it, so you've been you've been losing that design stamina, as it were. So I think it's a very good way of putting it.
I think what we're alluding to is like drip feeding the modernization efforts rather than like a massive one-off modernization effort. So if you don't drip feed, you would eventually end up to a point where you have no option but to modernize it and stop all the business value from delivering. So just sporadically or drip feed each of the modernization effort throughout your journey. So that's the way.
And it's that evolution I think that Mash talks about is like, sometimes it does make sense to spend a bit of time, think about something, re-architect part of the system slightly in order to move on, and having your product team on side and kind of having them know that, do you know what, it's going to take 3 months rather than 6 weeks to do this thing, but that means we'll be in a better space for the next 3 years is it like if you get there, it solves so many problems.
Yeah, it's interesting and encouraging. I think that a lot of this conversation has become around value creation. Right? So a lot of this has been around. You know, I asked the question. It seems a long time ago now about this kind of leadership buy-in, and leadership. You get leadership buy-in. I think that's what we concluded was that leadership buy-in comes from being able to prove the value, and also kind of being able to give an estimate of the cost. And I think we talk about we're all relatively experienced in trying to provide estimates for these things, right? So we can kind of estimate effort. I like something you said on our call, Toby, when you talked about the kind of the effort that we're putting into a kind of often a feature neutral exercise is what you call it. I wrote it down. And this can be a difficult thing to put across the board, right? It's like, oh, we're gonna put all this effort in, which is going to cost you this much money, and but no, the ideal thing will be that the user will see nothing, right? That's it's a funny thing, and so you need to put that. But we also talked, I think Manogna, I think you were talking about this kind of the hidden cost. So there's the cost of the effort that's required in engineering, but there are a bunch of gotchas, right, and hidden costs.
A bunch of them. Like, I mean, firsthand, I've noticed a couple. Like when we modernized our software and started to roll it out to our clients, there are teams like customer success, which are heavy process driven. Like they are like marketing teams. They go and sell the products. So we generally don't cater to the training costs that come with it, the upskilling that they have to go through, the process documentation that comes through. Oh my goodness, it was unbelievably high. And it actually stopped us from rolling out something because we couldn't move in without them being upskilled. And the second, especially if your business involves customer care agents, which has a high turnover, like people, they don't have a continuous set of people managing it. They need to have clear instructions on how to use the software. And even if a single screen and a single page and a single button changes, they need to know heavy process driven things. And there are generally like 2,000 people, 3,000 people sitting there trying to understand. So if you decide to modernize something, complete revamp of something, the first ask from my COO was like, how much would that cost me to train my agents? I can't actually take this because it's humongous. I mean, I can't, and especially if your business is heavy customer care agent driven, then like your business is coming to a halt. So not considering these upfront, it's a cost of building the technology essentially. So I mean, having a thought about this before going into the leadership or to the board to say, hey, like this is the plan, this is the cost, this is opportunity cost. If you can prove it to them to say, hey, in a year's time, this would all be worth it, perhaps there would be a case. If not, you would hit into multiple bedrocks. Like you wouldn't even realize they're there.
Yeah, and I think this is back to the feature neutral thing. I think you can end up with that drive. You can end up to minimize that user training. You end up with like a shiny version of what you got. You lose that opportunity to really develop the product and kind of reimagine.
Exactly. So you would have to work with your constraints, and most of the times you would get a worse of both the worlds. Like you would still build the same product, same usability, same value for the customer, but hopefully with a different technology, or because you are time constrained, you might build a worse product as well. So consider these things about the time constraints, your commitments, your contracts. Sometimes what we say is like, just taking an example, we'll offload Salesforce and then the contractual date comes in. And then suddenly you're like, oh, I need to build something because I can't have Salesforce beyond this. So you make a compromise. So compromise after compromise, like think about and be honest to yourselves about the hidden costs and not just shy it off to think that everything's all right. Everything's not all right. There is much more than technology to run a business.
And I think, is there perhaps hidden costs in your technology team as well, right? Do your team who are doing BAU or feature work on perhaps I think someone mentioned before they got something in classic ASP or VB.NET, and now you're going to move to TypeScript or React or whatever the platform is that you've chosen, right? There's those costs too, I think.
Yep, upskilling. Maintaining them, like upskilling generally takes longer than we expect. We can't upskill and I haven't seen at least upskilling people, and in the first 6 months they perform to the level that we want. So even the tech team, like what do we do with the old team if we want to revamp the languages as well? So a lot of things need to be considered, which should be much more holistic. I think to Emmanuel's point, when you go to the leadership team with a case, it has to be much more holistic than to say, hey, it reduces the cycle time, or this is a new technology, or this is just a microservices. There is a much more operational cost involved to it.
This is also true for practices as well, not just technology. So often we get asked like, oh, we have legacy system partly because we're not very good at automating tests or doing testing and development. Could you help kind of train our developers and so on? And say, well, you might make your problem worse at the start rather than better. If you think, and they often have this idea that as soon as they go through a training or they start learning, that productivity will increase. In fact, that's not the case. And sometimes people draw that simplistic hockey stick. Oh, you know what? You will kind of go down, dip for a bit, and then you'll start going up. Well, actually, that dip is much deeper than people think, and much longer than people think it is.
It's a pit. It's not a dip.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we also have to consider the customers. So I was in a building society, one of the largest ones. They had passbooks. They wanted to digitalize everything, but they had 15% of the customers who uses passbook. So you have to be also led by customer restriction. You cannot just move everything. Say we have the latest mobile app, blah, blah, blah. You can train your own stuff, but you cannot train all those people who have been using this bank for 60, 70 years. So those are also hidden costs you have to think about, not only about your internal organization and product and teams, but also about your end consumers. It happened quite a few times. So we had another project in NHS, and 20% of the budget was allocated for accessibility because some people would be blind. And the cost was, a lot. If you see 2% users, but 20% of the total budget is for accessibility. It doesn't make sense, but it has to be done because of regulatory thing. So these are hidden costs as well, which we all need to focus on.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, is there one last thing? We've reached 2 o'clock, and I've noticed a lot of people having to drop off to go to other meetings. But was there one last thing you want to say on that, Manala?
No.
No, I thought it was we spoke. Listen, it's 2 o'clock. It's clearly a conversation that could go for a long time, and perhaps there'll be future sessions from some of the themes that we pulled out. But thank you to all the panel members, and thank you to everybody who's joined. I hope everybody's taken away at least one nugget or something to think about for the rest of the day. So thank you, everybody, and nice to see you, and we'll see you all again soon.
Steve, thank you so much.
I'll hand over to you because I believe you're going to hang around if anyone wants to carry on the conversation, right?
Yeah, exactly that. I'll put the poll up there. So if people do want to stay, please just click yes. And if we get more than a couple of yeses, then we'll keep running. Steve, thanks so much for being here, and again, thanks to all the panelists who joined us as well. Yeah, fascinating session. We'll be running feedback out as well, so be good to connect with that and figure out where to go with the next one. So I've seen we've got 3 people that are up for breakout rooms. That's enough for me to keep this open and see where we go from here. Everyone else, feel free to drop off, and yeah, thanks everyone again, and I'll see you all soon.
Fortunately, I need to drop
Thanks,
off. So
Barry.
thanks so much, everyone.
Well, thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Very nice to speak to you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
So, I mean, we've got 3 people here, so I don't think we need a breakout room. We can just hang out here, and everyone's welcome to hang out for as long as they like. So we'll keep the thing rolling. I'm going to go and grab some lunch. Chelsea, you hanging around for a bit?
Yeah, I can hang around for a bit.
Is that all right? All right, I'm going to transfer over to you then, and I'll leave you guys. Thanks again, everyone. I'll see you next time.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hi Toby, it's nice to meet you. It's Christian from Codurance. We're linked in, I think.